Hey everybody, welcome to my Aconcagua gear video. I am so excited about our upcoming trip to Argentina. We leave in less than 48 hours. It's just hard to believe. We've been prepping for this for so long. Headed to the highest mountain in the world outside the Himalayas, the highest point in South America, the highest point in the Western Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, some 22,800 feet. So it's a huge endeavor to take on a mountain like Aconcagua, and I get asked all the time about what kind of gear do we need to do a mountain like Aconcagua. So what I want to do is I'm going to work through various sections of our gear plan, what we're going to take, what we need, what we don't need, and just going to work all the way through that. I'll go through it as quick as I can. I don't want this to be like a super long video, but I'm going to begin with a discussion of the various bags that you need to climb Aconcagua, okay? To do an Aconcagua climb, you really need at least 4 bags. That seems crazy, I know, but Aconcagua really represents like a 4-stage climb, okay? So there's like the travel to the base and the starting point of the mountain. That's like one phase. And then there's this trek that happens from the starting point up to base camp. It takes some days. We'll talk about that in a second. And then you have these indeterminate number of days where you're working your way up the mountain from base camp to camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, which we'll talk about. And then you have this summit, which is the 4th stage. And it really needs to be talked about all by itself because there's a lot of gear that we need just for that one day. So let me talk through the bags, and then we'll work through layers, gloves, what other kind of miscellaneous gear that you need in these things. But just to get started, you need 4 bags, okay? And the first bag that I'm taking with me to Aconcagua is just my simple gym bag, okay? Like this is just a simple, not real big bag. I've been using this to play basketball, take to the gym for years and years. That bag is responsible for getting me to the mountain. Okay, so when I leave Oklahoma here in 2 days, I'm going to fly to a couple of different countries. I'm going to have a stopover in Chile for an overnight in Santiago. Then I fly over to the city of Mendoza where we'll meet. And we stay one night, we do a gear check, and then the next day we drive up to the start point to a place called Penitentes. And so this bag is essentially the bag that gets me to Penitentes and back to Oklahoma, okay? And so in that bag, I'm going to have clothes for the next couple of days, and then I'm going to have clothes and toiletries and various things like this that I don't need on the mountain, but I do want to have with me, including a couple of changes of clothes on the way home. And one of the most important things about Aconcagua is we don't really know how long it's going to take us to climb the mountain. We have basically 4 days blocked off to summit, which we'll get to the summit day in a bit. But if we summit on the first of those days, that means at the end of the trip we have 3 extra days. And if we need to have some clothes, they'll be in this bag. Okay, but if it takes us 4 full days to get to the summit, or we have to wait out a weather window or something like that, it might be that I only need 1 day worth of clothes. So this is kind of the idea, the logistical challenge. I'm not going to talk about what's going in this bag. You can figure that out for yourself. It's just travel stuff to and from the mountain on any kind of international trip, all right? So let's talk then about how then we move basically from Penitentes to base camp, up the higher camps, and then to the summit, and then we retrace our steps through there, okay? So you're going to need basically 3 bags on the mountain. And the first is a giant duffel. This is the biggest duffel I've ever used for any of my trips, even bigger than the one I used for Kili. This is a 140-liter duffel bag, okay? Now this bag has to be massive. You do not want to skimp on this. You need plenty of room because your other 2 bags are going to start in this bag. So when I leave Tulsa, this bag will have my 2 backpacks in it, plus all of my gear that I'm going to need on the mountain, my sleeping bag, all my layers, my jacket, my parka, all the stuff. It's all going in this bag, so it's got to be huge. And so then I'm going to take that. It's going to show up there. We're going to get to Penitentes with that. And then out of that, I'm going to pull out my small trekking bag, okay? And so, and the second of these bags here, the third of these bags, is just my trekking backpack. Now, this is a 33. I have a Osprey Talon 33. I've trekked with this all over the world. I love it. It's super light. You can have whatever trekking bag that you want. Just whatever your normal backpack is. If you were going to go and hike in Colorado or Big Bend or one of our trips like that, whatever you would take for that will be totally fine for this. But it does have to fit in that big duffel bag. And so when we start on the trail from Penitentes, it's a 3-day hike to Plaza de Argentina, where our base camp is on one side of the mountain. And so each night we'll have access to the duffel bag, which has all of our other stuff, our sleeping bags. So we don't have to carry that on the day-to-day, but we do need to be able to carry water, our layers for that day, and various snacks and that kind of stuff. So a small 30-ish trekking bag. And so this bag, we will use it to get to base camp, and then it will go back in the big duffel, okay, when we get our other backpack out, and we'll use the big backpack up to the summit and back to base camp, and then we'll swap it again for this bag for the 1-day trek out. So to summarize that, right, so we got 3, 4, or 5 days, something like this, to get to the mountain, just travel. Then we got a 3-day trek, and we're on the mountain, however long we're on the mountain. Then we have a 1-day trek back out with this bag, and then we're back in the travel duffel, the small duffel. So we have the big bag. It gets carried by mules. Okay, so it can be pretty big, pretty bulky, have all of your stuff in it. They strap it to the back of a mule. It hikes with you alongside and beats you to base camp. And then that's what's used there. And then from that point on the mountain, I'm using my big backpack. Okay, now this thing is a monster, all right? This is a Mountain Hardwear 105. It's 105 liters. You can put like a small child in this thing. It is enormous, okay? You don't have to have a bag quite this big. The recommendations are all like 85, 90 liters and up, but it is better to have a little bit bigger of a bag because there are some moments on the mountain you're going to have to carry an enormous amount of things. So this is a good time to talk about the way in which we stage ourselves up the mountain for Aconcagua. So it's pretty straightforward how to get to base camp. It's a 3-day trek in with our trekking packs. But once we get there, then we begin a series of carries to the high camps, okay? And so what we'll do is we'll take like one day and we'll take like half of our stuff and some team gear and different things. We'll load it in this massive backpack. We'll hike it up to Camp 1. We'll stash it. Then we'll come back down to base camp, rest for a day, and then maybe the day after, 2 days after, we're going to fill the rest of our bag with all the rest of our stuff and we'll move to Camp 1. And so we'll do this periodically up to Camp 2 the same way, up to Camp 3 the same way in the mid-mountain, that third stage. And it might take us something in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 days to get from base camp to Camp 3 to be completely moved all the way up there. And so that's a process we call acclimatization, getting used to the different elevations where we hike high, come back down and sleep low, and get ourselves ready for our summit bid. So that's what we'll do. And then on the summit night, we'll use that giant bag, hopefully with not too much in it because we'll be wearing almost everything. And we'll make the jump from Camp 3 up to the summit, back to Camp 3, all in one day with that bag. And with that, let me tell you about what we're going to need in terms of clothing, layers, and other things, both for all these different stages and also for the summit. Let's talk about our clothing that we're going to have for the mountain. Climbing a mountain like Aconcagua requires a lot of versatility. And so one of the things that we do is we just layer up. We have lots of thin, versatile layers that we use in combination to help us handle all the different kinds of weather and things that the mountain can throw at us, which can be very hot when we first start the trek to very, very extremely cold at the top. So I use 6 different upper body layers and 5 different lower body layers. I'll tell you about each one and kind of what I bring for the mountain. Okay, so for my upper body layer, I use a base layer that is basically just a sun hoodie. Okay, so this is a very, very thin t-shirt. I have 3 of these, 1 with a hood, 2 of them without a hood. If I had more with hoods, I would take them, but I don't have them. And I use these kind of in combination while we're trekking, and then higher on the mountain, this will be the layer up against my skin. It's very, very comfortable for me. I'm used to it. I wear these shirts all the time. Anyway, I often run in them. And so that's my first layer, right? So very thin, very light. If it's cold outside, it's fine. If it's hot outside, it breathes very well. And it does a good job because it's got a hoodie to keep the sun off you, which is a huge challenge on a mountain like Aconcagua. My second layer that I like to have is kind of a windbreaker layer. And this one's a bit optional, but I have this Rab jacket here. It's also very, very thin, very light, would serve as like kind of a rain repellent or a snow repellent, but it's definitely not waterproof. It's not a replacement for a shell, which I have a shell. I'll show you that in a second. But I like this layer. So when I'm hiking a lot, what I'll often wear is that base layer sun hoodie with just this over it. And that's pretty comfortable for me with a pretty wide range of temperatures. But as the temperatures start to get a little bit cooler, you're going to want something to keep you warm. So you want some sort of mid-layer. And I use this mid-layer fleece. Mine is a hooded fleece from a company called OR, Outdoor Research, I believe. And I love this. If you guys know me outside of this, you'll know that I wear this basically all winter. It's like my layer that I go to. Once we get above base camp, I suspect that I'll basically live in this layer all the way up. And then my next layer that I have, and this will go on the outside, is my shell. So this is kind of like a bulletproof Gore-Tex. This is for rain, wind, snow, anything. So Aconcagua is not typically a mountain where there's lots of precipitation, though it can be as you get up higher. So it's pretty likely this stays in the bottom of my bag, but I'll have it with me all the time. So If it gets pretty windy, and it might, I might use those 3 layers all in conjunction I just showed you and add this on top of it. And then my 5th layer that I have of my normal versatile layers is a puffy jacket. Okay, so just a down jacket, very simple, very lightweight. And so a lot of times people wear these, you know, in the midst of their movie, but I don't really do that. I keep this in my bag, and then if we stop moving, I pull it out of the bag and I put it on, right? Or if we're sitting around camp or that kind of stuff, I just use it as a warm layer to keep me there. And so with those 5 layers, actually, I'm pretty comfortable at almost any temperature beyond like really, really, really extreme cold, which we might encounter on Aconcagua. So one of the layers that you're required to have, every company, every reputable company taking you up the mountain will tell you need a down parka, like a real serious parka. And this is not an inexpensive piece of gear, so I picked up one just for this. This is my parka, right? So this thing is massive, right? Super thick. Has these big pockets where you can put water and stuff in. So I suspect everything above Camp 2, so maybe even the trip to Camp 3, and certainly on the summit day, I'm going to be living in this. So I got a chance to test it out. We had some very extreme cold here recently, minus 17, minus 18 degree wind chill. If you can believe that, that's not as cold as it will be on the summit of Aconcagua likely. And so something like this is just an essential. And so when people go light on these things, they are going to suffer for that. So those are my 6 upper body layers. All right, so let's talk about my lower body layers. Besides underwear, you're going to want lots of pairs of underwear, which we can talk about if you want in a second. But beyond that, one of the things that we carry is I wear shorts. I like to trek in shorts. So all the way from the start of the trail all the way to base camp, I will likely be in shorts. I'm comfortable in shorts down into the 30s. If it's below 30s, if it's below freezing, I'll go ahead and put a pair of pants on. But I hike in these shorts, and then I use these kind of long knee-high compression socks. I got started using those when I was running, and so I'm just really comfortable with those. Some people wouldn't do that. They'd prefer to have something that's a bit more traditional like these, which are just you know, mid-weight wool socks. I'll have some of those with me too, but I'm pretty comfortable with these kind of knee-length compression socks in my shorts. So that's my first layer. That's all the way till it basically becomes freezing, and once it becomes freezing outside, then I've got a couple of other options. I go to a pant, and I have a really light, very thin trekking pant. This is made by Prana. Actually, my shorts are also, which I don't think you can see on the video. They may be a little low, but just very thin, simple, has a couple of pockets. I suspect I'll be living in these once we go above base camp. And then I do also have one more layer that goes on the very outside in the event that we get snow or precipitation. Just like I have a rain shell for my upper body, I have this rain pants for the lower body, and these do a great job of blocking wind. They're full zip on the side, so I can get them over my boots, which you'll see here in just a bit, which is kind of a giant pain. And then I have 2 more layers that go on the lower body. So as we get in colder temps, I will use this base layer. This is merino wool. It's just like a pair of tights almost. And so with the combination of this and those other pants, I'm pretty comfy, even with those long socks, to pretty cold temperatures. But on summit day, because again, we're talking about extreme cold, like one of the coldest places in the world at the time, I also have this pair of, these are basically insulated puffy pants, okay? So I have never used these before, except when I tested them out with my gear recently. I haven't used them on the mountain yet, but I'm excited to see. These are very, very warm. And so my suspicion is that I'm going to need all of those layers when it's time to head towards the summit on summit day. So I have lots of different layers that we can put in combination, all the way from very hot, dry, dusty conditions at the start of trail, all the way up mid-mountain to basically loading up everything that I have for the trip to the summit. And the same kind of philosophy applies when we start talking about socks. Okay, so I mentioned my trekking socks. I'll have a few pairs of these on the way up, but also one of the things that I'll do is I have these kind of long smart wool socks that are kind of ski socks, and I carry these with me. I have a couple of pairs of these, and these are what I plan to use on the mountain from base camp up to Camp 3. And those are that way because my long mountaineering boots just come up so high on my shins, which I'll show you those in a bit, that they would blister me otherwise if I didn't have really long socks. So I found these to be super helpful. And then I always keep one pair of very fluffy, super thick, like thick as you got socks. Keep them dry for the trip to the summit. I might even wear my my compression socks under them, and that will keep my feet nice and warm on the way to the summit. All right. So, but that same philosophy about layers applies also to the way we deal with gloves on the mountain. And so I will carry 3 pairs of gloves onto the mountain. The first is these. These are just my tiny little North Face gloves. I use these to run with. They're kind of like, I think Capeline, I think they call them. They're very thin liner gloves, comfortable. They're useful. I can use my phone with them. They have the little touchy things on the fingers. I can wear these at pretty much, you know, I'm pretty comfortable in these. But as temperatures start to get colder, I also have this pair of gloves, and these are kind of just ski mitts. These are made by a company called Burton. They're pretty average gloves. So I think a lot of people use them for skiing, but I found them to be pretty awesome gloves. I took them to the summit of Kilimanjaro the first time. They're pretty great, and I can put these gloves inside of these, and those are pretty comfortable. And I still have, if I put them on the right hand, a bit of dexterity with these. So, and I want that because also my other pair of gloves that I have, my 4th pair, are these Expedition mitts, okay? So these things are the real deal. These are the so you don't come home with frostbite on your hands, kind of big, super thick mitts, go halfway up my arm sleeves. You cannot skimp on this stuff, okay? The reason that people fail to summit Aconcagua largely is because of elevation and cold. And so you just have to be prepared to deal with that. So I will have those things with me. Plus I will have a couple of buffs. Now, buff's like a pretty useful little piece of gear. I actually picked this one up in Nepal when I was doing my Annapurna trek last year, which was pretty awesome. And so that's kind of special to me. And so I'll have one of these like really thin ones that I'll use for the trek and kind of wash at base camp and have it ready to go up the mountain. And then I have another one that I'm reserving just for the trip to the summit. It's a little bit thicker, a little warmer. It's more made for skiing. But I'll use this on the way up as like sun protection on my neck, and also just to breathe, to keep the dust out of my lungs on the way up. Just can't afford that in a dry condition. So the last thing here as far as clothing before we get into boots and the other like big heavy gear is I carry just a baseball cap. And so I'll wear my baseball cap with the sun hoodie on the trek. That's kind of the idea. I probably won't take my hat any higher than base camp. But you know, I have a shaved head, so I can't afford sunburn on my head, so I keep that there, keep the sun out of my eyes. That'll be pretty handy. And then everything from above base camp, you know, it's pretty chilly, and so by then I'm basically in my beanie here. And so I have 2 of these that I carry with me. They're both extra light, very simple. For me, I don't want one that's like super tight and presses on my ears, because I sleep in these a lot and it would really just bother me. So anyway, that's kind of the main setup as far as what we have in terms of clothes. So let's talk a little bit about boots and some other specialized gear and all of the things that you're going to need for the next step. Okay, now that we talked about all of the various layers that we have to have for Aconcagua, there are a lot of other miscellaneous items that we have to have, lots of other random gear and some different things. And so I just kind of grouped some of it up together here, and I'm just going to go through it as quick as I can. I'm sure there's some stuff I might overlook, but I'm going to do the best I can. So I'm going to start with eyewear, okay? So I have 2 things for eyewear. I have a pair of glacier glasses. These are like heavy-duty sunglasses. I have them in their nice little case here. They look just like normal glasses, but they're rated a little bit higher for some things. And then I have a pair of goggles, ski goggles. Ski goggles are an essential part of your Aconcagua gear because the snow and the wind, man, these are a lifesaver. So I will carry both of these actually in their real cases up to the mountain, and then I will pack them a little bit differently as we go up. All right. In addition to that, I didn't mention this earlier, but I do have a backpack cover for my trekking pack in case it rains in that situation. And then I have lots of different shoe options, okay? Boots and these things. I actually am taking 4 different pairs of shoes or boots onto the mountain for completely different things, okay? The first is pretty obvious. It's just my trekking boots, okay? So I wear these Salomon cross hikes. These are my favorite. I love them. I've been wearing Salomon shoes for a long time. I could wear trail runners for this particular hike, because it's really just what we're wearing from the start of the trail to base camp. And so I'll have these shoes with me all the way there until we start up from base camp to the higher camps, where we'll have to move into my double layer mountaineering boots, which I'll show you just in 1 second. But I also have to have one other pair of shoes for that portion of the trek also. And so I have these guys. These things are like, I don't know if you can see, but they're basically like super flimsy little guys here. They're basically like pool shoes almost. And one of the challenges about doing Aconcagua is there are river crossings on the trek. And so You don't want to be in a spot, excuse me, where that you have just flip-flops or where you have to take your, your hiking boots and try to walk through there. You don't want those to get wet. So what you do is you change into something like this. So I know it's a hassle, but it's one extra pair of shoes. Some people will opt for Crocs here. They like those for this situation, but this I found to be pretty good. I actually bought them for our Iceland trek because there's a lot of river crossings. And so we'll use those. And then while we're in and around camp, I have these down booties. As we get up high on the mountain, it's just cold, man. That's just how it is. And so just keep your feet in these nice down booties. And then those things can also slide inside of your double mountaineering boots, which, okay, it's about as time that we look at these things now. So these are my double layer plastic mountaineering boots. And they're called double layer because they have a full whole layer that comes outside of them. Mine are La Sportiva Evo G2s. And these are heavy duty things, okay? So these are the real deal. This is not an inexpensive piece of gear. This is something you have to break in. You do not want to be wearing for the first time when you get on the mountain. But these are essential because they will keep your feet warm. And at nighttime, you pull the liner out, you put it in your sleeping bag to dry it off, which sounds like a weird thing, but you can do that. And if you happen to need to get out of your tent, you just take your down booty, stick it inside your big boots, and you can walk around. So it takes some getting used to walking in these. They are very heavy for shoes, but very light for what they are. So I hope that makes sense. It took me a while to break them in. I used them on Mount Baker, and then I spent the last month walking in these. People in my neighborhood are looking at me like, what is this guy doing? But anyway, I broke them in. I feel good about that. That's coming. And so one of the things that comes with that is the boots have to be able to hold crampons. And so I have my crampons here. These are 12-point steel crampons. They're inside the crampon case. I'm not going to get them out, not least of which because they're sharp. But we will deal with some ice near the top of the mountain, so we have to have crampons. It's good if you can get used to using them. Some people, have never done that, and so you don't really want to find that out the hard way on the mountain. I do have trekking poles. I have 2 of these. You're only seeing one of them right here. That's for my trek all the way up. And we are required on Aconcagua to bring an ice axe, right? So I spent some time on Mount Baker earlier this year learning how to self-arrest, how to use an ice axe. That is a required piece of gear for Aconcagua, even if it's not particularly snowy at a given time. So that's a lot of the miscellaneous gear that we have. In addition to that, what do we use to sleep with? All right, so let me show you a couple of things. The first is this. We have two different sleeping pads, okay? You're required to have like a closed cell foam like this guy, the accordion style. You can also get the ones that roll up. Sometimes you see those. And that's one of your mats. And then you need an inflatable mat. I have a Thermarest Neo Air X Lite, which is awesome in that it's very light, but it is not awesome that it's crunchy. So I wiggle around when I sleep, man. So like whoever's around me, it's super annoying. But this is just what we have. And so we use these things in conjunction. One of these is not enough for Aconcagua. You will need both of them. And they're not really for comfort, though they do help you with comfort. They're more for warmth, what they call the R value, right? So that's pretty important. So you need those. And then this is optional, but I do have an inflatable pillow. It packs up very, very small. I don't really love this. I actually prefer on most of my treks to take kind of an actual, like a traditional pillow, but I'm just cutting weight. And so I can use some of my bigger puffy gear and stuff in one of my stuff sacks, use it for a pillow. I might do that, but I am taking this with me just in case. And then my sleeping bag for Aconcagua, I have a hike and bike. I think it's called a Snowmass Zero. And so most people will recommend a minus 10 or minus 20 degree sleeping bag for Aconcagua. I'm taking my Zero. I'm pretty comfortable with my Zero, even with the rest of my gear. I've had it in very cold temps. I might regret that. I might come back later and say, hey, that was dumb. You should have taken something worse. I do have a sleeping bag liner that I'll have with me in the event that I need it. That can add some degrees to that. But I think I'm going to be okay with my Zero. So that's my sleeping bag that I'll have with me. And then I've got all kinds of interesting other stuff that we have to carry, okay? Among things we have to carry, we got to carry a mug. I like this nice insulated one. It wasn't very expensive, but I have that with me on the trip. I have a spoon in its own little case here. I have a little bowl that's required. You've got to take one of those with you. And then you're going to need to be able to carry water. And so I carry water in a typical Nalgene bottle. So I have 3 of these Nalgene bottles that I'll have on the mountain with me. So This is just a typical Nalgene like you've seen before, you know, just a 1 liter wide mouth Nalgene. But 2 of these that I have with me have these little sleeves on them. So one of the problems on Aconcagua is that everything freezes solid. In fact, as we're looking through snacks, I was going through the aisles thinking, will this freeze? Will this freeze? Will this freeze? Excuse me. That's really the big challenge. And so what you do is you fill up your water bottles with hopefully hot water. You put them in one of these sleeves to hopefully hold it together, and then you put it in your bag upside down so that the freezing happens in the bottom of the bottle. I mean, that's just what you got to do. And so you really need these little koozies. Some of them have a zip-off guy. I prefer the one with the Velcro and just pops off, because anything that you don't have to zip and unzip with giant gloves and mittens on is just better. So you're going to need to be able to carry 3 liters of water. So that's one of the ways we do that. So I have 2 of these, and then I have a third one of these. It's a pee bottle, right? So you definitely want to mark that one completely differently. You do not want to be getting up and going outside of the tent 15 times a night in the middle of brutal cold. Your tent's mate will kill you. So it's better to just go in a pee bottle. So you can figure that out. Google it if you don't know what that's all about. In addition to that, I have a thermos. I've never carried a thermos before, but people tell me you gotta have a thermos in Aconcagua. So I got one of these guys, very lightweight. It's heavier than a Nalgene bottle, but pretty light still. And then I carry a ½ liter Nalgene bottle. And I like this in some ways because what I do is I'll fill up my Nalgenes, and then I'll fill this up at one at a time. And it fits in my pocket, and I like that. And I'm pretty comfortable with that thing. So I carry one of these guys as well on the mountain. Okay. A few more things. I have a Garmin InReach Mini, which allows me to do satellite communication, so I can text back and forth and communicate with people like you guys and my family, so they know I didn't die. All the way up and down the mountain. That's an important thing. It does require a subscription. Also not a cheap piece of gear, but it is pretty handy as much as I travel internationally to have the ability to text people from anywhere in the world. And so I have that with me all the time. I have some blister kit. That's pretty simple, straightforward stuff. I have just a tiny first aid kit plus all my own personal medicines, which I'm not going to show you now, but I have that too. Then I have this little Sea to Summit towel. It's like a camp towel. It's very light. Folds up into this nice little guy here. You'll want that in case you decide to take a couple showers at base camp. You will need a headlamp. I love this headlamp. This is one of my favorite pieces of gear that I've ever bought. It's super lightweight, very thin, and it doesn't carry batteries. It just has one of those like rechargeable USB batteries. And since I have a battery pack with me all the time, which is right here, I can always just charge that, which is awesome. And so I carry 1 or 2 of these. This is just like a USB power, battery charger, battery pack, but it's solar powered. So with the UV rays, there's goods and bads of that because of all the sun. You're watching out for sunburn, but the good part of it is you can just clip this to the outside of your bag and it will stay charged most of the time, especially if you're in a snowy condition. When I was on Mount Baker in the full snow, I could not bleed this thing out. Every day I left it clipped to the outside of the tent. It was out in the sun and the snow, and it just stayed charged. So I was able to keep my charger, but I do carry one more small one of these guys just as a backup. I like to have power with me all the time. Both to charge my phone and also my headphones. These are my running headphones, my Aftershocks. I swear by these. I have them on all the time. I'll hike with them. I'll sleep often with them. I'll listen to books and these kind of things, audiobooks, podcasts. That's kind of what I do. Let's see. And 4 more little pieces of gear that I'll mention. I do take a couple of little things of Tide detergent so I can do laundry in base camp. That's pretty handy. And then all kinds of little tiny toiletry items. This is my deodorant here. It's like very, very small, very easy. I carry these little guys. These are towels. They look like little coins, but once you get them wet, they pop out. And so instead of carrying wet wipes, I carry these guys. And then of course, I carry my ORU flag, which I hope to take to the summit, right? So to get some good pictures of me with my ORU flag at the top of the world and all that stuff. So that's a little bit about what the gear is that we're using for Aconcagua. I have a few more things here and there. I will have about I don't know, maybe like a gallon bag or 2 gallon bags worth of snack food and some different things that I'll have with me too, and a few little things here and there. But that's most of what we have for Aconcagua gear. So if you have questions, hit me up, let me know. I would love to hear from everybody.